tutorial. I should warn you, this might be a little rambly. I'm doing my best, but I'm not going to really have time to edit, so you're going to have to fast forward liberally. So at long last, I want to introduce you to sprites. What we'll be doing today is creating a variety of things, like here's an example of some stars that are sort of blinking in the background. Here's an example of a little bicyclist sprite that I built that moves. That's the kind of thing we're creating. So first question, what is a sprite sheet? The basic idea of a sprite sheet, here's this bicyclist you see moving. And actually, if you look down at the bottom of this, there I've actually labeled the frame. So there's 0, 1, 2, 3. This bicyclist animation only has 4 frames. What happens is the wheels move between 2 positions, and then the legs move. So I've got a leg up, leg down, and then wheel cycling, wheel down. And all I do is I play those frames in different orders. And actually, depending on how I play them, the bicyclist appears to be moving quicker or slower because the wheels spin more with the legs. So that's sort of the gist of what a sprite sheet is. I'll show you also in Piskel. So the easiest way to draw a sprite sheet is with this wonderful app called piskelapp.com. And you can make a new sprite. And when you're in Piskel, they show you sort of one frame at a time. You also can add layers. So let's imagine I wanted to draw a volcano exploding that I wanted to have in the background of my game. So I could draw my little volcano mountain. I could change the color if I felt like it, but whatever. We'll make this thing brown. And this is sort of like a paint app like you might be used to. You can also add layers, which is a drawing concept. So if every frame has 2 layers, that's going to be kind of handy. I'll show you why in a second. Then I can add a new frame. Actually, even better than adding a new frame typically is probably copying, because now every frame will have the same background. And then now what I will do is I will add the lava coming out. So I can add on this second layer lava. And oops, I forgot to copy. Oh, did it not copy both things? Well, here we go. We'll duplicate. And I'll just sort of make the lava grow each frame. And it shows in the upper right-hand corner that lava getting bigger and bigger. Oops. So I can keep duplicating, and my volcano will keep growing. Oops. I'll make maybe 8 frames. Oops, all right, and there it is playing. So that's sort of the idea of a sprite sheet. Like here I've got lava that grows. Obviously, if you took more time with the art, you could make cooler art. That's the gist. When we are done, we're going to make an image. And this thing would default. So if I've got 6, for example, here I could do 2 by 3 or whatever size I want. I'll say sure, go 2 by 3, 32 by 32 resolution. If I were to download a file, which I'll do to start, I will get an image that looks kind of like a movie reel. So there's my 2 by 3 file. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And what we do in JavaScript is we load that image and then we play one portion of it at a time. So basically we tell the computer, show the top left, now show the top right, now show the medium left, now show the medium right, now show the bottom left, now show the bottom right. The more frames you have, the more complicated your animation might be. The computer doesn't have to show them in order, although normally that's the most logical way, but you could make animations that work in all different ways. And you could build your little character to move around in different ways and things like that. Now, in general, you'll notice like I made a volcano. Imagine I've got some whole background and I might have sparkling stars and volcanoes that explode, and then I might have a character who runs around and he's got a weapon that moves and all these things. You might be tempted to draw all those things together. If you draw them separately, it's easier to control the animation separately. So each component of your game that might have its own animation should be its own sprite. And then you can put lots of sprites together on your game. So you could put 1,000 volcanoes together or what have you. All right, and the two ways you can use your sprite once you've drawn one, is you can either export and download a file. That'll work if you're working locally, if you're working in Replit. If you're working in CodePen, CodePen doesn't actually let you attach images. So we're going to use a little hack, which is this Sprite Sheet Data URI export. There it is, Sprite Sheet Data URI export. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you your whole sprite sheet encoded as text. So this thing here is called a data URI. Notice it says data image, PNG, etc., etc. Base 64. What it's done is it's actually taken the raw data of the image, converted it into letters and numbers, and then stored it as one thing. So if your image is high resolution, this would be really, really big. So that I just copied, and I'll be able to paste that in and use it as a volcano. So the two things you'll need to know, you'll need the image itself. You'll also need to know the resolution of your image. This one was 32 by 32. When you build it, it shows your resolution. That's how many bits each one is. All right, so let's see now, how do we get the image loaded into our game? So I'm going to go to my naked CodePen. Oops, not that one. Here's a brand new CodePen. If you're working in Replit, it would be very similar. Notice I always use this same starter. It's got a drawing that's a simple line. And I can see that, like if I move these things, the line will move. So I have the game library loaded. I want to make sure that that's working. All right, so there's two things I'm going to need. One is I'm going to need the image. So I could say something like var volcano, or actually I'll make it a const because it's not going to change, equals. And then I have this new word sprite. Sprite comes from my game library. And the sprite gets a bunch of arguments. The things it needs the source, which is that image URL. It needs the frame width, which is 32. It needs the frame height, which is 32. It should have an X and a Y where we want to put it on the canvas. And that's sort of all you need to get started. Nothing is happening now because I haven't added it. And then I can say game add drawing, and I can just add the sprite that I just created. So I'll say game add drawing volcano. And there's my volcano exploding. All right, that's pretty handy. There are some more arguments to this. If we were to go to the docs, we can now see there's docs for sprite. And here's the list of all the properties. We can give it the source, the frame width, the frame height, the frame we start on, a frame sequence if we wanted to run in a different sequence other than just in order, the target width and target height, which could be different than the original if we want them to be, whether to animate or not, it defaults to animate, but you could set that to true and false. And then the frame rate is how many frames per second we run the animation at. So let's go to frame rate. It defaults to, what does it default to? Oh, it doesn't say, but it defaults to, I think, maybe 24 or something. So we'll just set it to something slow, like 5. Now it'll do 5 frames per second. That moves a little slower. I could go 1 frame per second, and now it'll move very slowly. And we can sort of appreciate how this thing works. There we go. All right. My computer is really tired. I think it's this Piscal app is actually using a lot of memory, so I'm just going to close that for now. I think that's the issue. Alrighty. So there we go. Now I have a volcano. I can move the X and the Y wherever I want them. And I have the gist. Now, one annoying thing here is that my data is right in the middle of my code, and that's really untidy. One trick, now if you had the image as a URL, that would fix that. Another trick is we can throw a little script. Any place you put a script tag in your HTML allows you to put JavaScript. So I'm just going to move. If we were in a not in CodePen, you could also make a new file that contained all of your sprites. Just call it like or image URLs.js. But here I can just make a new variable, or I guess a new constant to hold my. So I'll make a new constant called volcano URL, or I guess volcano source. And I can copy this there, and then here I can just write volcano source. And now my JavaScript is a little tidier. So that's a nice little trick. You can put all of your image URLs here if you want them. So let's say I'm going to put a star source in there too. Actually, let me unclose my previous URL. This guy should have a star source in it somewhere. Yeah, there's my star data. Copy element. All right. I'm going to put stars in this thing too, just for kicks. So the stars will be there. That's a long one, huh? Oops, star source. All right, so now I can make a new one. Star equals new sprite. Source, star source. Frame width 32. Frame height 32. X 10. Y 10. And then I will add the drawing star. All right, now I've got 2 sprites in my game. Woohoo! So that's the fancy way to load it. Again, just to review, I threw an extra script up here. That could be a separate script if you're in Replit or if you're working locally. But in CodePen, we're only allowed 1 JavaScript file, so I just threw it into the HTML. I put all of my super long variable definitions in there. So like here's the star source. Again, if your data, your files are going to be enormous because that's the actual image data as text, and then here's volcano source. You don't want that in the middle of your code because it makes it confusing. Now my code is much cleaner to read. It all fits on one screen. So volcano source, that's that big long image file. and then here's the star source. And all I had to do was set a frame rate, and it automatically draws the frame at that frame rate. Cool. Oh, I already drew our first sprite. Go me. Okay. Oh, a couple things to note. You'll notice that when I added the drawing, I was adding a new sprite. This sprite is what we call an object. Before, we handed a function to add drawing. In this case, this object actually provides a draw method. So what we have is we have a little star object, and the star object can draw itself. So I'll show you how that works. So for example, if I did add click handler, function xy, I could make it so that the star's x value, so when I handed an x, the star got an x value set. I can set the star's x and the star's y to wherever we click. And now I have a star that moves. So what's happening is I created this star object. The click handler updates the x and y property of the star object. And then the way the sprite works is it draws it at its current x and y. So it makes it very easy to sort of keep track of the things you're creating on the screen and move them around. So I guess the other thing I should add here is update. So we're used to doing everything in that add draw handler. Now I've created an object which has its own add draw handler, right? So the what happens here is the sprite object that I created for you handles drawing the image and figuring out where to draw it and so on. So how would we change if we wanted, for example, for this star to be a falling star? How would we make it fall? That kind of thing. So what I've actually done is, among these parameters, there is an update. So update is a function just like you're used to. It could take things like step time. It could take width and height. It gets all the standard draw methods. It also gets a sprite, which is the object itself. So what's kind of handy about that is I could just say sprite y, for example, is going to be the y location. So if I just want to make it fall, I'll just make it fall, 10, let's say 10 pixels per second. I would say 10 times step time over 1,000. And now I have a falling star. So what's happening under the hood is I created this new star sprite. I added the drawing star sprite. When that drawing runs, the 60 times per second, before it does the drawing of the sprite, it comes here and it calls this thing step time, width, height, sprite. I just change the y property of the sprite and it falls. Beautiful. Let's see if that works. Oh, cool. All right, so I just made the target width and target height change too, so it disappeared. Let me make that a little bit. Here, we'll add elapsed. And we'll say 1 minus elapsed over 10,000. Oh, that shrunk awfully fast. Oopsie daisies. Add some more zeros there. All right, now it's going to be slowly shrinking as it falls. All right. Another way to put this would be to say, well, that's okay. It's times equals. So Another way I could do this is just say minus equals, so it's going to shrink 1 pixel. It's probably easier to think about it that way. Now it's going to shrink 1 pixel a second. Oops. Oops. Hold on. Step time. There we go. Slowly shrinking. So target width and target height is how big it is. So it's getting smaller all the time. There we go. And if I wanted to make the volcano grow, for example, I could do the same thing. Let's say update, function, sprite, step time, and I'll say sprite target height plus equals step time over 100. That's going to grow fast. There it goes. It's only growing in one direction here, but that's kind of fun, and I can make the width too. Time over 100. So now it's growing at 10 pixels a second. Wow, look at that. It's getting bigger. There's some error in my drawing. I don't know what that is. I can figure that out later, but there we go. So that's the update method. It's pretty handy. Oops, get rid of that. So you can make anything you want change about your sprite as it goes. If I wanted my volcano to rumble, that might be a more realistic thing I might do. Let's make the x plus equals math.random times 100 times step time over 1,000 or something. Oh, wait, negative 50 plus. Let's make it move back and forth, sorry. Uh-oh. Oh, my bad. There we go. There, now we have a rumbling volcano. It just jitters randomly. Isn't that lovely? All right, that's pretty good. One other nifty thing, I did make a handy copy method. So if I wanted to make a second volcano, let's say, I could, actually, I could add it this way. I can say add drawing, and then I can just say volcano copy. Now, if I copy the volcano exactly, I'm drawing 2 volcanoes on top of each other. Since these move randomly, Since these move randomly, you can actually see that there are 2 separate ones. Usually you wouldn't notice because they'd be the same. So you can give it new properties you want to change. So like I'll put this one at 400. And now I've got 2 volcanoes there. And if I put this in some kind of for loop or something, so here I'll make for var x equals 0, x is less than 500, x plus equals 50. That will say, repeat this code. Now I could do something like that, and I should get a whole bunch of volcanoes. So there's all my volcanoes exploding. And I could do the same thing for the stars if I wanted to. For y equals 0, y is less than 100, y plus equals 20. I'll put them every 20 pixels. And then for var, so 0, x is less than 500, x plus equals, I'll make these spread out kind of randomly. Math.random times 32, game, add drawing, star, copy, XY, and at the XYs. Oops. All right. Oh, I forgot they were all falling. So now I've got a whole bunch of falling stars moving at random. Here, I'll make the stars. Well, that's kind of fun. The stars fall randomly. All right. There you go. It's a whole group of random stars. If I wanted to make the stars fall in a random way, let's find the stars update function. Here's the stars update function. Notice it says plus equals 10. I could make there be a new variable. So I can attach a new parameter to the sprite. So I could say Vy for velocity y equals 10 and plus equals Vy times step time. So far that does nothing, but if instead of that, if I add here a thing that says if not sprite Vy equals 20 times math.random, now, oops, what did I do wrong? Oops, I forgot a sprite here. There we go. Now the stars are falling at different speeds. I could also add, there is a remove function here, so remove. So I could now say if sprite.y is greater than 300, remove. So now the sprites will eventually fall off the screen. Be a little careful with this kind of thing. If you make too many objects in your game, it can start to overwhelm the computer. So if you're talking about thousands of objects or something, there are some techniques we'll have to learn later. Often what games do, for example, if you had like bullets flying on the screen, your game would actually shrink or reuse the bullets rather than make them go away. So, for example, instead of removing the sprites when they go off the screen, I could just set them back to 0. The other thing I could do here is say, like, if sprite.targetWidth is less than 2, I could say once it's, actually I'll do that instead. Here I'll say once they've shrunk too much, we'll put them back to their original size and put them back up top. So let's try that out. So now we've got a whole lot of random stars falling at random speeds. We've got a whole lot of shaking volcanoes. Once those stars shrink too much, they are going to reappear on the very top of the screen. There they go. Oh, and of course, the thing I didn't think about is they will all shrink at the same moment. So they're actually all going to go to the top in a second. There they go. Now they're all up top. So, you know, whatever. I could fix this up. This could become math.random times 100. Now they won't all go to the same spot. I'll make them shrink a little faster so we can see the effect happening quicker. Here they go. And they start again. Yeehaw. Cool. All right, well, that's probably plenty of a sprite introduction. I was going to show you a more object-oriented approach. Well, I'll show that later. This has been a long enough video. I guess one other thing I didn't include here is how to use a frame sequence. That's if I wanted my sprite to move in a different order than it moves. So for example, my volcano is, I think, a 6 frame drawing, and right now it just goes from 0 to 6. I could add here an argument called frame sequence, which is a list of the frames. So if I want to go backwards, for example, I'll go from frame 5 to frame 0. Oops, I forgot a comma. There it is. So now the volcano is shrinking instead of growing. So there it goes, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if you had a sprite where it made sense, you could have all, I could go 5, 3, 4, 2, 1, 1, 5, 0 or something. I can make whatever sequence I want, and it will move them in that way. So this is now kind of a confusing 5, 0, 5, 0, 1, 2, 3, 5, 0. So now I've got a really strange, I'll speed this up a little bit so we can see it a little faster. Now I have a weird flashy volcano that doesn't go in order anymore. So that's what frame sequence does. It's pretty handy. Between frame sequence, getting the sprite object in your update function so you can update your sprite as you want. You can add handlers that update sprites, and you can use like a for loop to create like a whole bunch of sprites. I think that should give you enough to play with. So for this week, try to go ahead and draw your own sprite, get a lot drawing on the screen. Maybe take your previous game that has like a circle or a square and replace the circle or square with a new sprite. Or maybe just add some cool backgrounds to your game with some animation like my rumbling volcano or my twinkling stars. I wouldn't actually recommend 100 falling stars. It's a little much. All right, I'm going to stop recording now. Hope this is helpful.